2013, a chilling disappearance made headlines in the small town of Maplewood, California. A 15-year-old girl named Emily Harper vanished without a trace. Rumors of her troubled family life swirled, but nothing substantial ever emerged. Her stepmother, Rachel, became a person of interest, though no evidence connected her to the crime. To this day, Emily's case remains unsolved, haunting the quiet suburb. What I'm about to tell you, however, isn't on the news. This is my story. I was 12 when Dad married Rachel. I still remember the wedding, a modest ceremony in our backyard, under the canopy of a sunny California sky. She looked beautiful in her simple lace dress, her dark brown hair swept into a bun, her green eyes glowing like emeralds. Everyone seemed happy that my dad had found someone after losing Mom to cancer 3 years earlier. At first, I liked Rachel. She was kind, always smiling, and went out of her way to make me feel included. She baked cookies, took me shopping, and even helped me redecorate my room. But as weeks turned into months, little things started to feel off. Rachel had a way of looking at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, her smile too wide, her eyes unblinking. She'd hum tunes I didn't recognize while cooking, her voice low and almost hypnotic. And then there was the mirror. It started one night when I was brushing my teeth. I looked up into the bathroom mirror and saw her standing in the hallway behind me, just staring. I jumped and turned around, but she was already gone. "Rachel?" I called out. No answer. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. The turning point came a few months later, in late October. Dad was away on a business trip, leaving just me and Rachel in the house. That Friday night, I was watching TV in the living room when Rachel sat down beside me, a cup of tea in her hands. "You know," she began, her voice soft and almost maternal, "I've been trying so hard to be a good stepmom to you." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "But sometimes," she continued, "I feel like you don't appreciate me. Like you wish I weren't here." "That's not true," I said quickly, though part of me wondered if it was. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Good," she said, patting my knee. "Because you're very important to me, sweetie. More than you know." That night, I woke up to the sound of faint humming. It was coming from downstairs. I crept out of bed and tiptoed to the staircase, my heart pounding. The house was dark except for a dim glow coming from the kitchen. Rachel was standing by the sink, staring out the window, her back to me. She was humming again, the same strange tune I'd heard her sing before. "Rachel?" I whispered. She stopped humming. Slowly, she turned around, her face partially hidden in the shadows. "Can't sleep?" she asked, her voice almost too sweet. I thought I heard something," I stammered. She tilted her head, her green eyes gleaming in the dim light. "It's just us here, honey. You're safe. Go back to bed." I nodded and backed away, but as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Her face didn't match her body, it was distorted, her smile impossibly wide, her eyes hollow and black. I didn't sleep that night. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Rachel became more controlling, more invasive. She'd go through my school bag, rearrange my room, and stand outside my door at night, her silhouette visible under the crack. One evening, I found her in the attic, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by old photo albums. She was holding a picture of my mom. She was beautiful, Rachel said without looking up. "She was," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Rachel finally looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Do you think your dad still loves her?" I don't know." She smiled, but it was wrong, too wide, too forced. "I just want us to be a family," she said, her voice trembling. "A real family." The night before Dad came home, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I froze, my heart racing. "Emily," Rachel whispered, her voice sing-song. "Are you awake?" I didn't answer. The floorboards creaked as she approached my bed. I shut my eyes, pretending to be asleep. "I just want to protect you," she murmured, her breath hot against my ear. "But you make it so hard." When I opened my eyes, she was gone. Dad didn't believe me when I told him about Rachel. He said I was overreacting, that I needed to give her a chance. So I stopped trying. But then, Rachel started talking about taking me on a trip. "It'll be just the two of us," she said one morning over breakfast. "A chance to bond." I didn't want to go, but Dad insisted. "It'll be good for you too," he said. We left the following Saturday. Rachel drove us up into the mountains, far from Maplewood. The farther we went, the more isolated it became. By the time we reached the cabin, I had no cell service. That night, as the wind howled outside, Rachel lit a fire in the fireplace. "Do you know why I married your father?" she asked, her voice low and distant. I shook my head. "Because of you," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "I always wanted a daughter. Someone I could mold, shape, make my own." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You're special, Emily," she continued, leaning closer. "So special. And I won't let anyone take you away from me. Not even your mother." "My mom's dead," I whispered. Rachel smiled, her teeth glinting in the firelight. "Is she?" "I don't remember much after that. Just flashes. Rachel chasing me through the woods. Her voice calling out to me, echoing in the darkness. "Come back, Emily. I'm only trying to help." I don't know how I made it back to town, but when the police found me, I was half frozen and delirious. They searched the cabin but found no sign of Rachel or my dad. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. The official story is that Rachel snapped and disappeared, taking Dad with her. But sometimes, late at night, I hear that strange, haunting tune in my dreams. And when I look in the mirror, I swear I see her standing behind me. In 2006, the quiet rural town of Barrow Creek, nestled in the valleys of inland California, became the center of a haunting mystery. A local teenager, Claire Avery, was found wandering along Route 74, barefoot and trembling. She wouldn't speak a word for days. When she finally did, what she told authorities was so chilling that it left even the toughest investigators unsettled. No charges were ever filed, and no records remain, but the townsfolk still whisper about Claire and her stepmother, Evelyn, in hushed tones. This is the story no one ever told in full. I was only 13 when Dad married Evelyn. It was a whirlwind romance, and just like that, she moved into our old farmhouse at the edge of Barrow Creek. Evelyn was beautiful in a classic, almost old-fashioned way, with porcelain skin, jet black hair, and a serene smile that seemed too perfect to be real. At first, I thought she was kind. She'd braid my hair in intricate patterns, sing lullabies with a voice so soft it felt like a dream, and spend hours tending to the rose garden that Mom had planted before she died. Evelyn seemed to love the house more than we did, almost as if she'd been waiting to claim it. But soon, things started to feel off. It began with the door to Mom's old room. After she passed, Dad had locked it and told me it would stay that way, out of respect. But one day, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. "Did you go in there?" I asked Evelyn. She smiled, her hands caked with dirt from the garden. "Of course not, sweetie. Some things are better left undisturbed." But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard creaking floorboards coming from the hallway. I got up and peeked out, and there she was, Evelyn, standing in front of Mom's door. She wasn't moving, just staring at it, her head tilted slightly to one side. I wanted to say something, but a strange feeling of dread kept me frozen. I quietly crept back into bed and pulled the covers over my head. Evelyn's behavior grew stranger as the weeks went on. She would spend hours sitting at the kitchen table, writing in a leather-bound journal that she never let me or Dad see. She started lighting candles all over the house, saying they were for cleansing. "It's good for the soul," she explained when Dad asked about the flickering flames that filled the living room one evening. One night, I came downstairs for a glass of water and found her standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by those candles. She was whispering something under her breath, her eyes closed. "Evelyn?" I called out, my voice trembling. She didn't respond, just kept whispering. Her shadow, cast by the candlelight, stretched unnaturally across the walls, twisting and writhing as if it had a life of its own. "Evelyn!" I shouted. She snapped her head toward me, her face illuminated by the flickering flames. "Go back to bed, Claire," she said, her voice low and firm. The turning point came on a stormy night in late October. Dad had left early that morning to pick up supplies from a nearby town and hadn't returned. Evelyn said the storm must have delayed him, but something in her tone felt off. That evening, as the rain lashed against the windows, Evelyn sat me down at the dining table. "Claire," she began, her voice unusually soft, "do you ever feel her?" "Feel who?" I asked, confused. "Your mother," she said, leaning closer. Her green eyes seemed almost to glow in the dim light. "She's still here, you know. Watching us. Watching me." I pushed my chair back, unsettled. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn smiled, but it wasn't comforting. "Your mother loved this house. Loved you. And love like that doesn't just disappear. It lingers. But it's okay. I'm here now. I'll take care of you." That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of humming. It was the lullaby Evelyn used to sing, but it sounded wrong. Distorted. I turned over, and my heart nearly stopped. She was sitting at the foot of my bed, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her head tilted as she stared at me. "Evelyn!" I screamed, scrambling backward. She didn't flinch. "You remind me so much of her," she whispered. "Your eyes, your hair, even the way you smile. It's like she's still here." "Get out of my room!" I shouted, my voice cracking. She stood slowly, her shadow stretching impossibly tall across the walls. "You don't understand, Claire," she said, her voice eerily calm. "This is all for you. Everything I do is for you." She left the room, closing the door behind her. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Dad still wasn't back. Evelyn told me he'd called and said he was staying overnight because of the storm, but something about her explanation didn't sit right. When she went into the garden, I snuck into her room, desperate to find answers. The leather journal was on her nightstand. I opened it, my hands shaking. The pages were filled with strange symbols and writing in a language I didn't recognize. But as I flipped through, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was a drawing of our house, with the word sacrifice scrawled across the roof. I slammed the book shut and turned to leave, but Evelyn was standing in the doorway. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I tried to run past her, but she grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You don't understand, Claire," she hissed. "This house needs balance. Your mother's presence is too strong. I have to make it right." I broke free and ran, but she was right behind me. Her footsteps echoed through the house as I bolted up the stairs and into Mom's old room. The air inside was icy cold, and the smell of roses was overwhelming. Evelyn banged on the door, screaming for me to come out. But then, her screams turned into something else, a deep, guttural growl that didn't sound human. The door burst open, and there she stood, her eyes black as coal, her mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. "You'll be with her soon," she said, advancing toward me. I don't remember much after that. When I woke up, I was lying on the side of Route 74, soaked to the bone and covered in scratches. They never found Evelyn. Or my dad. The house on Barrow Creek was abandoned, left to rot. But sometimes, when I drive past it, I swear I see a figure standing in the window, watching me. And at night, I still hear that lullaby. In late 2019, a chilling case emerged from a small town in Northern California called Stillwater Hollow. It's a place barely on the map, with just a handful of homes nestled between dense woods and mist-covered hills. The story began with a police report. A teenage boy, Andrew Graves, was found sitting alone on the front porch of his family's house, staring blankly into the trees. He wouldn't speak, eat, or even blink, and when authorities finally got him to talk, the tale he unraveled was too bizarre, too horrifying for most to believe. The media didn't cover the case. The family's records were sealed, and the house was put up for sale within months. But locals still whisper about Andrew and his stepmother, Meredith. Here's what they say happened. I was 15 the year my dad married Meredith. My mom had died 2 years earlier in a car accident, and Dad was lonely, too lonely. He met her online, and after just a few months of dating, he brought her to Stillwater Hollow. Meredith was strange. She wasn't like the other women in town. She had this way of speaking, slow and deliberate, like she was choosing every word carefully. Her voice was soft, almost too soft, like she didn't want to be heard by anyone but you. At first, I thought she was nice enough. She made my dad smile again, which I hadn't seen in years, and she went out of her way to make me feel included. She'd bake cookies, ask me about school, and even bought me a brand new sketchbook when she found out I liked to draw. But there was something about her that didn't sit right with me. Something off. The first time I noticed it was in the way she moved around the house. Meredith was quiet, unnervingly quiet. She had this habit of appearing in doorways without making a sound, her hands clasped in front of her, her head tilted just slightly to one side. One night, I was sitting in the living room playing a video game when I felt someone watching me. I turned, and there she was, standing in the hallway, her pale face barely visible in the dim light. "Meredith?" I said, my voice shaky. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't mean to startle you, Andrew. I was just watching." "Watching what?" "You," she said simply, and then she turned and walked away. Meredith had a fascination with the woods behind our house. She'd spend hours out there, walking among the trees or sitting on a fallen log, staring into the distance. She told my dad it was her way of meditating, of finding peace. But one evening, as the sun was setting, I saw her standing at the edge of the woods, staring at something I couldn't see. Her body was rigid, her arms hanging limply at her sides. "Meredith?" I called out from the back porch. She didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. I stepped closer, and that's when I heard it, a low, guttural hum coming from her. It didn't sound human. It was deep and rhythmic, almost like a chant. "Meredith!" I shouted, louder this time. She snapped her head toward me, her face expressionless. "You shouldn't be out here, Andrew. It's not safe after dark." Things escalated quickly after that. One night, I woke up to the sound of soft humming coming from the hallway. It was the same melody my mom used to sing to me when I was little, a lullaby she made up. But my mom was gone, and there was no way Meredith could have known that song. I got out of bed and peeked into the hallway. The humming was coming from Meredith's room. I pushed the door open a crack, just enough to see inside. She was sitting on the floor, her back to me, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders. In front of her was a small wooden box, and inside it were photographs, pictures of me and my mom. "Meredith?" I whispered. She stopped humming but didn't turn around. "Go back to bed, Andrew," she said, her voice flat. I closed the door and ran back to my room, my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning, I told my dad what I'd seen, but he just laughed it off. "You're imagining things," he said. "Meredith loves you. She's just trying to connect with you." But I knew what I'd seen, and it didn't feel like love. That night, I decided to confront her. I waited until she went outside to the woods again, then snuck into her room. The wooden box was gone, but I found something else, a journal hidden beneath her mattress. The pages were filled with strange symbols and phrases written in a language I didn't understand. But what scared me the most were the drawings. There were dozens of them, all of them of me. In some, I was sleeping. In others, I was standing in the woods, my eyes blank and hollow. And in one, I was lying on the ground, surrounded by trees, with Meredith standing over me. My hands were shaking as I put the journal back. I didn't hear her come in. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice cold and sharp. I spun around, the blood draining from my face. I was just... "Those are private," she said, stepping closer. Her eyes were dark, almost black, and her smile was gone. "You shouldn't have seen them." That night, I locked my door and pushed my dresser in front of it. I didn't trust her, and I didn't trust my dad to believe me. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of scratching. It was coming from my window. I sat up, my heart racing, and saw her standing outside, her face pressed against the glass. Her eyes were wide and unblinking, her lips curled into a twisted smile. "Let me in, Andrew," she whispered, her voice muffled by the glass. I screamed, and she pounded on the window, her hands leaving bloody smears on the glass. The next thing I remember, I was running. I don't even remember getting out of the house, but I ran until my legs gave out. They found me on the side of the road the next morning, covered in scratches and rambling about Meredith. When the police went to the house, she was gone. My dad was gone too. The only thing they found was her journal, open to a page with one sentence written over and over. "He's mine now." The house in Stillwater Hollow is still empty, but some nights, if you drive past it, you might see a figure standing in the window, watching. Waiting.